Hello and welcome to Quick Learn Photography, straight to the point videos that teach you everything that I've learned in over 10 years of professional photography. In this video, we're going to talk about prime lenses, and by the end of this video, you'll know what they are and how to use them. So a prime lens means it doesn't zoom. There's no zoom lens. Zoom lenses are really common. I'm going to do a video on zoom lenses and the different types there are and why you need ones over others and what they can do. But a prime lens is a fixed lens. So this one is a 50mm. It's a prime lens and it's 50mm on a full frame equivalent. We'll deal with that later. So it can't zoom. You can get wider ones. The one video I mean now is a prime lens. It's a 20mm, so it's quite wide, and I can't zoom it. Same as this one, it's 50mm. You can get longer ones, 135mm, 35mm, 85mm. They're fixed. You can't zoom them. The good thing with primes is the aperture is usually wider like that, see? So I've put the aperture at its widest. So there's its smallest and there's its widest. If you don't know what aperture is, check out the video about aperture and why it's so important with exposure and shallow depth of field as well, how it can help. So if you're in a low light situation, you're going to want the aperture at its widest to let in as much light as possible. The good thing with prime lenses is whatever aperture you choose, say the widest, like this one here, f1.8, it will stay there. No matter what you do, it's going to stay there because it's a fixed lens, okay? The aperture isn't going to change. With zoom lenses sometimes, or variable aperture zoom lens, which are the cheaper ones, and I'm going to go into more detail about zooms soon. When you zoom, the aperture shrinks. So let's say like this one here, which is a very cheap kit lens, a beginner one. Nothing against kit lenses. This is really good. You can get great images from these things. And this is about £50. It's for a Nikon. The aperture, if I can get it, is not as wide as you can see. So it looks wide there, but as you zoom, I don't know if it will show it, the aperture shrinks. See it shrinking? So this starts at f3.5, but when you zoom it, there's nothing you can do. The aperture is going to shrink to f5.6, I think it goes to, yeah. So the aperture is going to shrink, so you're going to lose light more and you're going to have to deal with that variable. So prime lenses are really good because they let in a lot more light. This is f1.8. This starts at f3.5. You can get other lenses that do zoom that are say f2.8 constantly. That's a fixed aperture lens. I'll show you those later on in more detail about lenses. But prime lenses are great. Now some are really expensive, but some are really cheap. This one secondhand cost me £60 and I've used it loads. I've done loads of professional photography with this. 50mm is a great fixed focal length to have because that's kind of what we see with our eyes, 50mm, and it looks real. And you can have that wide aperture at f1.8 as well. So prime lenses are fixed. You can't zoom with them. You have to pick and choose your focal length. So for different jobs, if you want wider or more zoomed. But sometimes it's good because you keep a fixed, there's some builders out there, I don't know if you heard that. You can keep a fixed focal length so your shots will all look consistent, which is a benefit as well. But sometimes you might want to zoom to sort of like capture wide, to zoom or whatever. But that's what prime lenses are. You don't have to spend a fortune on them. Some of my favorite lenses are not that expensive when it comes to prime lenses. If you start going to f1.4, f1.2, it's going to start getting pretty expensive for those ones. But do you really need that? Some do. But yeah, prime lenses are great. It just basically means that they're fixed. You can't zoom with them, all right? So I hope that helps. And that's what prime lenses are. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate a really cheap prime lens on the Sony. This is the cheapest one they do, the 50mm 1.8 Sony, cheap as chips. And this is exactly like the Nikon one that I just showed you. That's a 50mm 1.8 as well that I got second on eBay. The G Master 50mm 1.4s, 2s are in the thousands. So this is just to demonstrate a prime lens. So what we're going to do, oh dear, misfire. What we're going to do is use our trusty model. I haven't named it yet, so any suggestions, leave a comment below. So what we've done here on this lens, we've got the widest aperture, which is f 1.8. So this is as wide as it can go, and this is a 50mm, and there's a brick wall behind. So if we zoom in a little more so we can see what's going on, just lock onto her eyes. Brilliant. So f1.8 here, great. And we got a good shallow depth of field in the background. So that's another reason why you might want a prime lens, to really blow out the background and isolate the portrait. So the wider the aperture, like 1.8, 1.4, 1.2, it really destroys the background. So 50mm is really good for that. So let's raise the aperture, which is going to be here, and raise it up. Now I'm on auto ISO, so the exposure is adjusting according to the aperture dropping, so it's going to start ramping up the ISO more to balance it out, because I'm keeping the exposure set. So look at the background, f6 points. Let's start again. So 1.8, f2.5, f2.8. That's a really wide aperture for zoom lenses. f4, f3.5 is where sort of basic lenses start. f4, f5. Keep an eye on the background, look at the brickwork, it's going up and up. f9, f10, f11, 14, 16, and the brickwork is pretty much completely in detail, so it doesn't really separate the subject very much. Now if we look at the ISO, look at that, 12,000 ISO. The reason being is because the aperture has shrunk so much, it's not letting in a lot of light, so the ISO is going for the roof. So let's drop it back down to f1.8 really fast and watch the background. There you go. Now it's nice and blurry. Now that was on auto ISO, so let me turn that off and get it to the base level ISO, 100. Brilliant. So we're at 60th of a second, f1.8 and 100 ISO. So 60th of a second might not be fast enough for what you want. Now, I've got no auto settings here, so this goes back to the exposure triangle, how to control all the variables. We're at the widest aperture, f1.8, which a bog standard lens or a kit lens or a zoom will not do, okay? So I want the shutter speed faster. Let's get it to 200th of a second. See what's happened to the ambient now? Even the aperture is maxed out. So let's go 250th of a second. This could capture movement and things like that, but this is too dark. So now we have to ramp up the ISO. So there it is. We're there. So ISO 400. So if we drop the aperture down to a kit lens or a beginner lens, f3.5, excuse the train if you can hear that, that's cut down the ambient light again. So now we're going to have to ramp up the ISO even more to what we want. There we go. So that's that's ISO 1250. So that's at entry level. Let's say you zoom on a variable aperture lens and you get it to f5.6. Then the ambience dropped again. So now, and this is bearing in mind, you want to keep your shutter speed at 250th. So now you're going to have to raise your ISO even more. So there you go, 4000 ISO. Now that can cause grain, and if it's a low light situation, if there's lots of dark shadows, that can start looking pretty messy unless you've got a pretty powerful camera like a full frame or a really good crop sensor. So this is why aperture is so helpful. Also the background there is more in detail. You want to drop that down. So let's get the aperture down to the lowest, f1.8. Oh, that's the shutter speed, sorry. Let's keep it at 250. Let's get the aperture down to 1.8. So it's letting in too much light now. So now we've got to kill the ISO down. Let's get it down, 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 down. Bear in mind, we want to keep 250 of a second. That's all right. So ISO 400, lovely. f1.8, really nice shallow depth of field, or bokeh. So if we're doing portrait mode, 250th of a second is unnecessary. Let's say you drop it down to 100th of a second. If the subject stays nice and still, that's too bright. So let's get the ISO down to 0 or 100 base level. That's lovely. We're at f1.8, still a little bit too dark. So let's drop the shutter speed. Brilliant. So prime lenses stay fixed. You've got a massive wide aperture. Even 1.8 is huge, and it's a really, really good one to start with. Also, prime lenses seem to have a little bit better quality in the image as well, because there's less lenses, less elements in the image, but I can't see too much of a difference. Newer lenses or lenses recently are really, really good. So I hope that helps, and yeah, that's a prime lens in action with the wide aperture of f1.8.